Jack Miller had been on the space station for exactly 6 hours, and he already wanted to go home. The station was called Prometheus, and it floated somewhere between Mars and Jupiter. It was huge, bigger than anything Jack had ever seen. Thousands of aliens from dozens of different worlds lived and worked here. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some had 4 arms, some had scales, some floated instead of walking. And all of them looked at Jack like he was a bug that had crawled into their kitchen. Humans were new to the galaxy. Earth had made first contact only 3 years ago, and most aliens still thought of humans as primitive creatures who had barely figured out space travel. Jack was one of the first civilian humans allowed on the station. He was an engineer sent to help with some structural repairs, nothing special. Just a guy with a toolbox and a job to do. His friend Tom Harris met him at the docking bay. Tom was a military man, one of the few human soldiers stationed on Prometheus. He was tall, serious, and knew how the station worked. "You look lost," Tom said with a small smile. "I feel lost," Jack admitted. "This place is insane." Tom laughed and slapped him on the shoulder. "You'll get used to it. Come on, it's dinner time and you need to eat before your first shift." The dining hall was the size of a football field. Long tables stretched across the room, filled with creatures eating strange foods and speaking in languages Jack couldn't understand. The noise was incredible. Clicks, whistles, growls, and words all mixed together into a wall of sound. Tom guided Jack to a food station where a machine scanned his body and produced a tray of something that looked almost like chicken and rice. Jack wasn't sure he trusted it, but his stomach was empty, so he decided to take the risk. "Where do we sit?" Jack asked, looking around at the crowded tables. Tom pointed toward a group of humans in the corner. "Over there. We usually stick together. It's easier that way." Jack nodded and started walking, but then he stopped. He had noticed something strange. In the far corner of the hall, there was a table with plenty of empty seats. In fact, almost the entire table was empty. Only one person sat there. Woman, at least she looked like a woman. Her skin was pale lavender and her hair was white like fresh snow. Her eyes were silver and they seemed to glow softly in the light. She was beautiful in a way that didn't feel quite real, like a painting come to life. She sat alone, eating her meal in silence. No one went near her. The aliens at nearby tables had turned their chairs away from her as if they were afraid to even look in her direction. "Who is that?" Jack asked. Tom's face changed. The smile disappeared. "That's Princess Vela. She's from the Arathi Dominion. Stay away from her." "Jack, why? What did she do?" Tom lowered his voice. "The Arathi are telepaths. They can read your mind. Some say they can control your thoughts if they want to. Her grandfather was a warlord. He once destroyed an entire enemy fleet by driving their commanders insane. Just reached into their heads and broke them." Jack looked at the princess again. She was cutting her food into small pieces, eating slowly, not looking at anyone. She didn't look like a monster. She looked lonely. "Everyone's afraid of her," Tom continued. "No one wants to sit near her. No one wants her in their head, so she eats alone every single day." Jack felt something twist in his chest. He knew what it felt like to be alone. When he was a kid, his family had moved around a lot, new schools, new towns. He was always the outsider, always the one eating lunch by himself. while other kids laughed and talked with their friends. That's sad, Jack said. Quietly, maybe, but it's also safe. Come on, let's go. Tom started walking toward the human table, but Jack didn't follow. He stood there, looking at the empty seats around the princess, thinking. Jack, Tom turned back. What are you doing? I'm going to sit over there. Tom's eyes went wide. Are you crazy? Did you hear what I just said? I heard you. But look at her, Tom. She's just sitting there alone. I'm not going to be afraid of someone just because everyone else is. Jack, this isn't Earth. You don't understand how things work here. Arathi are dangerous, really dangerous. Jack shrugged. I'm just going to eat my dinner, that's all. Before Tom could argue more, Jack walked away. His heart was beating fast. He wasn't brave. He wasn't trying to make a statement. He was just tired and hungry. And the seat was empty. And it didn't feel right to leave someone alone like that. He reached the table and stood across from the princess. She looked up at him, and for a moment their eyes met. Her silver gaze was cold and sharp like winter moonlight. May sit here? Jack asked. The princess didn't answer. She just stared at him as if she was waiting for him to run away. Like everyone else, Jack sat down. Dining hall went quiet. Hundreds of aliens stopped talking. Hundreds of eyes turned to look at the human who had just done the unthinkable. Jack felt their stares on his back like needles, but he ignored them. He picked up his fork and started eating. The silence stretched on. The princess was still watching him, her silver eyes unreadable. Jack swallowed his food and looked up at her. Could you pass the salt, please? For a long moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, the princess reached out and picked up the small container of salt. Her hand was trembling slightly. She placed it in front of Jack without a word. Thanks, Jack said. He sprinkled some salt on his food and kept eating. The princess continued to stare at him. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Jack didn't push. He just ate his meal in silence, letting her watch him. Around them, the dining hall slowly returned to normal. The aliens went back to their conversations, though many of them kept glancing at Jack with expressions of shock, confusion, and something that might have been respect. When Jack finished his meal, he stood up and nodded politely to the princess. Thanks for letting me sit here. I'll see you tomorrow. He walked away, leaving Princess Veela alone at her table, but for the first time in a very long time she didn't feel quite so alone. That night in her private quarters, Veela sat by her window and looked out at the stars. She thought about the human with the brown eyes and the simple smile. He hadn't bowed to her. He hadn't trembled in fear. He hadn't begged for mercy or tried to impress her with flattery. He had just asked for the salt. Veela touched her hand, the one that had trembled when she passed him the container. She didn't understand why it had shaken. She wasn't afraid of him. He was just a human, a primitive creature from a primitive world, but there was something about him, something different. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time someone had spoken to her like a normal person. She couldn't. The next day, Jack sat with her again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Princess Veela didn't know what to do with him. Every evening, when the dining hall filled with hundreds of aliens from across the galaxy, the human engineer would get his food, walk past all the other tables, and sit across from her. He would say hello. He would eat Sometimes he would talk about his day. And then he would leave. It was the strangest thing that had ever happened. To her, Vela had grown up in the royal palace of the Arathi Dominion. She was the daughter of Emperor Kale, ruler of 7 star systems. From the moment she was born, everyone around her had been afraid. Servants whispered behind her back, diplomats smiled with fear in their eyes. Even her own family kept their distance, worried that she might accidentally see something in their minds that they wanted to keep hidden. The Arathi were telepaths. They could feel the emotions of others. With training they could read thoughts. With great power they could even control minds. It was a gift that made them powerful, but it also made them monsters in the eyes of the galaxy. Vela had learned to use her abilities when she was just a child. She could feel fear, hatred, and disgust flowing from everyone around her like cold water. She had built walls around her heart to protect herself from the pain. She had learned to be cold, distant, and untouchable. And then this human came along and ruined everything. On the 5th day, Vela decided to use her powers on him. She needed to understand why he wasn't afraid. There had to be something wrong with him, some kind of trick, some kind of trap. She reached out with her mind gently, carefully, and tried to feel his emotions. What she found made no sense. Human minds were different from anything she had ever experienced. Most aliens had thoughts that flowed in clear, organized patterns. They were like books that she could read page by page, but Jack's mind was chaos. It was a storm of colors, sounds, and feelings, all mixed together, happy and sad at the same time, worried and hopeful, tired and excited. Everything was tangled up in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And underneath all of it, there was warmth, simple, honest warmth. He wasn't afraid of her. He didn't hate her. He didn't want anything from her. He was just there sitting with her because he wanted to. Vela pulled back from his mind, shaken. "You okay, Jack?" asked, looking at her with concern. "You looked a little lost there for a second." Vela quickly composed herself. "I am fine, good. Hey, I wanted to ask you something. What do you do for fun around here? This station is huge, but I haven't found anything interesting to do when I'm not working." The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her about fun before. I do not have fun." Jack raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean? Everyone does something for fun." Clear's throat. "Read books, watch movies, play games. I am a princess of the Arathi Dominion. I do not play games." Jack smiled. It was a warm, friendly smile that made something flutter in Vela's chest. "That sounds really boring. Back on Earth I used to go fishing with my dad every weekend. We'd sit by the lake for hours just waiting for the fish to bite. Most of the time we didn't catch anything, but that wasn't the point. The point was spending time together." Vela listened quietly. She had never heard anyone talk like this before. Diplomatic conversations were always about power, treaties, and threats. Jack talked about lakes and fish and his father. "Tell me more," she said, surprising herself. "About Earth." Jack's face lit up. "Really? Okay. Well, Earth is beautiful. We have these huge oceans that cover most of the planet. The water is blue, and when the sun sets over the waves, it turns orange and pink and purple. It's like the sky is on fire. And we have mountains with snow on top, and forests full of animals, and deserts that go on forever." As he talked, Vela found herself leaning forward, Fascinated. She had read about Earth in reports and documents, but those were just facts and numbers. Jack made it sound like a living, breathing world full of wonders. My sister runs a bakery in a small town called Millbrook, Jack continued. She makes the best apple pie you've ever tasted. Every time I visit, she gives me a whole pie to take home. I usually eat half of it before I even get through the door. Vila felt something strange on her face. It took her a moment to realize that she was smiling. She couldn't remember the last time she had smiled. The days turned into weeks. Jack kept sitting with her, kept talking to her, kept treating her like she was just another person instead of a monster to be feared. He told her about his work, fixing broken pipes and damaged panels all over the station. He complained about his boss. He showed her pictures of his dog, a fluffy golden creature named Max, and slowly, carefully began to open up to him. She told him about her home world, a planet of silver forests and crystal lakes. She told him about her mother who had died when Vila was young. She told him about the pressure of being a princess, of always being watched, of never being allowed to make mistakes. Jack listened without judgment. He didn't flinch when she mentioned her telepathic abilities. He didn't look away when she talked about her grandfather's dark legacy. He just nodded and said, "That sounds really hard. I'm sorry you have to deal with all that." It was such a simple thing to say, but it meant more to Vila than all the formal speeches and diplomatic compliments she had received in her entire life. One evening, Ambassador Lyra came to see Jack after dinner. Lyra was an older Arathi woman with kind eyes and gentle manners. She had been assigned to watch over Vila during her time on the station. "Mr. Miller," LRA said, bowing her head slightly. "I wanted to thank you." Jack looked confused. "Thank me for what?" "For sitting with the princess. For talking to her. You cannot understand what a gift that is." Lyra's voice was soft and sad. "She has been alone for so long, her whole life. People have run from her, but you stayed. You treated her like a person." Jack scratched the back of his head, looking embarrassed. "I didn't do anything special. I just talked to her." Lyra smiled. "Sometimes that is the most special thing of all." She walked away, leaving Jack standing in the corridor, wondering what he had gotten himself into. That night Vila lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. She could still feel the echo of Jack's mind in her thoughts, that warm, chaotic, beautiful storm that she couldn't quite understand. She had spent her whole life building walls around her heart. She had told herself that she didn't need anyone, that she was better off alone, that connections only led to pain. But now, for the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong. She thought about Jack's smile. She thought about his stories of Earth, of oceans and mountains and apple pie. She thought about the way he looked at her without fear, without judgment, without wanting anything in return, and she realized with a mixture of joy and terror that she had found something she had never expected to find: a friend. The reception hall was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Ambassadors, generals, and leaders from dozens of worlds had gathered for a formal diplomatic event. It was meant to celebrate the upcoming peace treaty between the Arathi Dominion and several other major powers. There was music, food, and speeches. Everyone wore their finest clothes and their most polite smiles. Jack felt completely out of place. He stood in the corner wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, holding a glass of something purple that he was too scared to drink. Tom had insisted that he come. You're famous now, Tom had said, the human who sits with the alien princess. People want to see you. Jack didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to go back to his room and watch a movie. But then he saw Vela enter the hall, and suddenly he was glad he came. She was wearing a long silver dress that shimmered like starlight. Her white hair was arranged in an elegant style, and her silver eyes seemed to glow even brighter than usual. She was beautiful. She was also, Jack noticed, completely alone. Ambassador Lyra walked beside her, but no one else came close. The other guests moved away as Vela passed, creating a bubble of empty space around her. They smiled and bowed, but their eyes were cold with fear. Jack started walking toward her. Before he could reach her, something happened. A large alien stepped into Vela's path. He was from the Vaughn Syndicate, a species known for their aggressive nature and their hatred of the Arathi. His skin was gray and rough, like stone. His eyes were small and cruel. His name was Delegate Grath, and he had been drinking heavily all evening. Well, Grath said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. The Mind Witch herself. Tell me, Princess, how many people have you driven insane today? The hall went quiet. Everyone turned to watch. Vela's face was calm, but Jack could see the pain in her eyes. I have no wish to cause trouble, Delegate. Please let me pass. Grath laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. No wish to cause trouble. Your entire species is trouble. Your grandfather was a monster. Your father is a tyrant. And you're the worst of all, sitting there in your fancy dress, pretending to be civilized while you read our minds and plot against us. Vela said nothing. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her. Nothing to say. Grath stepped closer, his voice rising. Of course not. You know I'm right. You don't belong here. You should be locked up somewhere far away, where you can't hurt anyone. The galaxy would be better off without the Arathi. Still, no one moved to help. The other delegates watched in silence, some nodding in agreement, others simply unwilling to get involved. Even Lyra could only stand by, bound by diplomatic rules that prevented her from interfering. Jack had heard enough. He pushed through the crowd and stepped between Grath and Vela. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. That's enough. Grath looked down at him with surprise, then disgust. Who are you? Some kind of human pet? My name is Jack Miller. I'm an engineer, and where I come from, we don't treat people like this. Grath laughed again. People? She's not a person. She's a weapon with a pretty face. She's done nothing to you, Jack said. She sits alone every day because everyone is too scared to even look at her. She eats by herself. She walks by herself. She has no friends, no allies, nothing but people like you calling her a monster. He paused, his voice hard. Maybe the real monster is someone who attacks a woman who can't fight back without starting a war. The hall was dead silent. Grath's face twisted with rage. You dare speak to me like that? You're nothing but a primitive ape from a primitive world. You've been in space for 5 minutes and you think you can lecture me? I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm just telling the truth. Grath's eyes narrowed, then a cruel smile spread across his face. Very well, human. If you trust the princess so much, let her prove her innocence. Let her read your mind right herein. front of everyone if she finds nothing but good intentions. I'll apologize. But if she finds secrets, lies, or hidden darkness, well, then we'll all see what kind of fool you are, the crowd murmured. This was a trap and everyone knew it. Reading someone's mind in public was an invasion. It would expose every private thought, every embarrassing memory, every hidden fear. No one in their right mind would agree to it. Jack turned to Vela. Do it. Her silver eyes went wide. What? Read my mind. I've got nothing to hide. You don't understand what you're asking. I would see everything, every thought, every memory, every secret you have ever kept. Jack shrugged. That's fine. I'm not that interesting anyway. Vela stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or fear. She found none. He was completely serious. Jack, she whispered, you don't have to do this. I know I want to. Go ahead. Slowly, carefully. Vela raised her hand. The crowd held its breath. Her fingertips touched Jack's temple, cool and soft against his skin. And then she was inside his mind. She saw everything. She saw his childhood, growing up in a small house with a big yard. She saw his mother cooking dinner and his father teaching him to ride a bike. She saw his sister laughing as they played in the snow. She saw his first day of school, nervous and scared. She saw his first heartbreak, crying alone in his room. She saw his years of training, learning to build and fix and create. She saw his dog Max jumping up to lick his face. She saw the day he arrived on the station, overwhelmed and afraid but determined to do his best. She saw the moment he first noticed her sitting alone, and the simple thought that had passed through his mind, that's sad. No one should have to eat alone. She saw the warmth he felt every time they talked, the genuine happiness when she smiled, the concern when she seemed troubled, the friendship pure and uncomplicated that had grown between them. There were no schemes, no lies, no hidden darkness. Just a good man with a kind heart. Vela pulled back her hand, trembling. Tears were forming in her silver eyes, and she couldn't stop them from falling. The hall was completely silent. Well, Graf demanded, what did you find? Vela turned to face the crowd. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the entire room. He is kind. The words hung in the air. Graf's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He had expected to humiliate the human, to prove that no one could truly trust an Arathi. Instead, he had proven the opposite. Around the hall, the other delegates began to whisper. They looked at Jack with new eyes, not as a primitive human from a primitive world, but as something else entirely. Something brave, something different. Tom appeared at Jack's side, looking stunned. What the hell did you just do? Jack wiped a bit of sweat from his forehead. I have no idea. Vela reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were still trembling. Thank you, she whispered. No one has ever done anything like that for me. Jack squeezed her hand gently. That's what friends are for. Graf turned and stormed out of the hall, muttering curses under his breath. Other delegates slowly went back to their conversations. But the mood had changed. Something important had happened here tonight. Something that would be talked about for years to come. The human engineer who had opened his mind to an alien princess, and the princess who had finally found someone worth trusting. After the incident at the reception, Jack became famous throughout the station. Aliens who had ignored him before now nodded respectfully when he passed. Some even stopped to shake his hand or ask questions about Earth. A few. Reporters wanted interviews. Jack declined all of them. He wasn't interested in fame. He just wanted to do his job and spend time with his friend. But not everyone was happy about what had happened. 1 week after the reception, Captain Ben Shaw found Jack in the engineering bay. Ben was a human cargo ship captain, a rough man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of hard work. He had been flying between Earth and the station since first contact, and he knew more about galactic politics than most diplomats. "We need to talk," Ben said, his voice low and serious, "somewhere private." Jack followed him to a small storage room in the back of the station. Ben locked the door behind them and turned on a device that would block any listening equipment. "What's going on?" Jack asked. "You made some powerful enemies, kid. That stunted the reception embarrassed a lot of people. The Vaughn Syndicate is furious. They've been trying to destroy the peace treaty for months, and you just made their leader look like a fool in front of the entire galaxy." Jack frowned. "Grath started it. I just stood up for my friend. I know and I respect that, but these people don't play fair. I've been hearing things, rumors, whispers in dark corners." Ben's eyes were hard. "There's a plot, Jack, a conspiracy. They're planning to kill Princess Vela." Jack's blood went cold. "What?" "The treaty signing is in 3 days. If it succeeds, the Arathi Dominion will become allies with half the galaxy. That's bad news for the Vaughn and their friends. They want the treaty to fail, and they're willing to do anything to make it happen." "What are they planning?" Ben shook his head. "I don't know the details, but I know they want to kill the princess and make it look like a human did it. 2 birds with 1 stone. They destroy the treaty and turn the galaxy against Earth at the same time." Jack felt sick. "We have to warn someone. The station security, the ARA ambassador. Someone. I already tried. No one believes me. I'm just a cargo captain. They think I'm paranoid." Ben put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "But you're the hero of the hour. People might listen to you, and more importantly, you have access. You're an engineer. You can go places on this station that most people can't." Jack understood what Ben was asking. "You want me to investigate? I want you to find proof, something solid that we can take to the authorities. Otherwise that princess you care about is going to die, and your whole species is going to take the blame." Jack didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." For the next 2 days, Jack worked day and night. He used his engineering access codes to check systems all over the station. He looked at power readings, maintenance logs, and security reports. He crawled through service tunnels and examined equipment that hadn't been touched in years. Tom helped when he could, using his military connections to gather information. Ben kept his ears open in the cargo bays and trading posts, listening for any useful gossip, and slowly, piece by piece, they uncovered the truth. The conspiracy was bigger than any of them had imagined. It wasn't just the Vaughn Syndicate. Coalition of minor species had joined together, all of them with reasons to hate the Arathi. They had been planning this for months, and their weapon wasn't a bomb or a poison. It was the station itself. Jack found it on the second night, hidden deep in the station's maintenance tunnels. Someone had sabotaged the primary reactor cooling system. It was subtle, almost invisible. A few wires rerouted, a few valves adjusted, a few sensors disabled. On their own, none of these changes would cause any problems, but together at the right moment they would cause a catastrophic overload. The treaty signing was scheduled to take place in the Grand Assembly Hall. That hall was directly above the main reactor. When the cooling system failed, the reactor would overheat. The explosion would kill everyone in the hall, including Princess Vela and dozens of other important leaders, and the sabotage had been designed to look like human error. The false trail led directly back to Jack's engineering team. They're going to blame us, Jack said, his voice hollow. They're going to say, we did this. Tom's face was grim. Can you fix it? Jack studied the damage systems, his mind racing. The sabotage was clever. It used old technology, mechanical systems that the station's automated monitors couldn't detect. Most alien engineers relied on computers to find problems. They would never think to look for something so simple, but Jack had been trained differently. Humans were new to space travel. They didn't have fancy automated systems. They still used their hands and their eyes and their brains. They still learned how to fix things the old-fashioned way. Yeah, Jack said. Finally, I can fix it, but I'll need to do it during the ceremony. If I touch anything now, the conspirators will know their plan has been discovered. They might try something else. That's cutting it close, I know, but it's the only way. That evening, Jack went to see Vela. She was in her quarters preparing for the ceremony. When she saw the look on his face, her silver eyes filled with concern. What's wrong? She asked. Jack told her everything: the conspiracy, the sabotage, the plan to kill her and blame humanity. Vela listened in silence, her face growing paler with every word. Why are you telling me this? She asked when he finished. You could have just fixed the problem and said nothing, because I need your help during the ceremony. I need you to stall, delay the proceedings, give me time to get to the reactor and fix the damage before it's too late. Stall how? I don't know. Use your telepathy. Make people feel confused. Make them forget what they were saying. Anything to buy me a few extra minutes. Vela shook her head. If I use my powers like that, people know. They'll be afraid. They'll think I'm manipulating them. I know. I'm sorry. I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. Vela was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him, her silver eyes shining with something Jack couldn't quite read. Why are you doing this? She asked. You could die down there. Your species could be destroyed. If this fails, why risk everything for me? Jack thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer. Because you're my friend, he said simply. That's enough. Vela stared at him. In her entire life, no one had ever said anything like that to her. She had been valued for her power, her bloodline, her political importance, but never just for herself, never just as a friend. She reached out and took his hand, the same way he had held hers at the reception. Then I will help you, she said. Whatever it takes. Jack squeezed her hand and smiled. Thank you. They stood there for a moment, two unlikely friends from different worlds, preparing to face the greatest challenge of their lives. Tomorrow they would find out if they were strong enough to survive it. Grand Assembly Hall was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Leaders from dozens of worlds had gathered to witness the signing of the peace treaty. Cameras broadcast the event to billions of viewers across the stars. This was history in the making. the Arathi, dominion feared and hated for generations, was about to become an ally of the Galactic Coalition. Princess Veela stood at the front of the room next to her father's holographic projection. Emperor Kale was speaking about peace, cooperation, and a new era of understanding. His voice echoed through the hall, deep and commanding, but Veela wasn't listening. Her eyes kept moving to the door, waiting for the signal. Somewhere beneath the floor, Jack was running for his life. The maintenance tunnels were narrow and dark. Jack had a small flashlight in his mouth and a bag of tools over his shoulder. He ran as fast as he could, his boots pounding against the metal floor. Behind him, he could hear shouts. The conspirators had discovered that someone was on to them. They had sent people to stop him. Jack didn't look back. He just ran. The reactor room was at the end of a long corridor protected by a heavy metal door. Jack reached it and punched in his access code. The door hissed open, and he threw himself inside, slamming it shut behind him. The reactor was a massive cylinder in the center of the room, surrounded by pipes, wires, and control panels. It hummed with power, feeding energy to the entire station. And right now it was getting hotter. Jack could see the sabotage immediately. The cooling valves had been partially closed, restricting the flow of coolant. The temperature monitors had been disabled, so the automated systems didn't know anything was wrong. In about 15 minutes, the reactor would overheat. In 20, it would explode. He had to work fast. Back in the assembly hall, Veela felt the emotions of everyone in the room pressing against her mind. Fear, hope, suspicion, ambition. It was overwhelming. But she pushed through it. She had a job to do. When it was time for her to speak, she stepped forward and began to talk. She spoke slowly, carefully, drawing out every word. She talked about her hopes for the future. She talked about the mistakes of the past. She talked about her grandfather and her father and herself, and the burden of being an Arathi in a galaxy that feared her kind. The audience listened, captivated by her words. And underneath it all, Veela reached out, with her power gently touching the minds of the delegates. She didn't control them. She didn't read their thoughts. She just created a feeling of calm, of patience, of wanting to hear more. It was subtle, so subtle that no one noticed, but it was enough to slow things down, to stretch the ceremony a little longer. In the reactor room, Jack was working as fast as he could. His hands were bleeding, the pipes were hot, and he had to use his bare fingers to turn valves that hadn't been moved in years. The heat was intense, making sweat pour down his face and into his eyes, but he didn't stop. The conspirators were pounding on the door, trying to break through. Jack could hear them shouting, threatening, promising terrible things if he didn't open up. He ignored them. He had minutes left, maybe less. One valve opened, then another, then another. The coolant began to flow again, rushing through the pipes like water through a river. The temperature started to drop slowly at first, then faster. Jack watched the readings on his portable scanner, holding his breath. 90% capacity, 80%. 70. The reactor was stabilizing. Jack let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. His hands were burned and bleeding, but he didn't care. He had done it. He had saved them all. The door exploded inward. Jack spun around to see 3 figures rushing toward him. They were worn, their gray faces twisted with rage. They had weapons in their hands. and murder in their eyes. Jack had nothing but his tools and his burned hands. He grabbed a heavy wrench and prepared to fight, but before the Vaughn could reach him, something unexpected happened. Tom appeared in the doorway behind them along with Ben and a squad of station security officers. They tackled the conspirators to the ground, wrestling the weapons from their hands. Jack, Tom shouted, "Are you okay?" Jack leaned against the reactor, exhausted. "Yeah, I'm okay. The reactor is stable. We did it." Tom grinned, relief flooding his face. "You crazy son of a gun. You actually did it in the assembly hall." Vela felt a wave of relief wash over her. She didn't know how she knew, but she could feel it. Jack was safe. The danger had passed. She finished her speech with a smile, and the crowd erupted in applause. The treaty was signed 1 hour later. The conspirators were arrested and their plot was exposed. Evidence showed that they had planned to frame humanity for the disaster, but their plan had been destroyed by a single human engineer who had risked his life to save a princess who was supposed to be his enemy. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Arathi Dominion, grateful for what Jack had done, made a formal request to the Galactic Coalition. They asked that Earth be elevated to full membership, with all the rights and privileges that came with it. No more being treated as primitive newcomers. No more being looked down upon. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Coalition agreed. In the medical bay, Jack lay on a bed while doctors treated his burned hands. The pain was bad, but the medicine helped. He stared at the ceiling, too tired to think. Door opened and Vela walked in. She was still wearing her formal dress, but her hair had come loose and her makeup was smeared from crying. She looked exhausted, but her silver eyes were bright with emotion. She sat down in the chair next to his bed, the same way he had sat next to her at that first dinner so many weeks ago. "You saved my life," she said softly. Jack shrugged, wincing at the pain in his hands. "You helped. Couldn't have done it without you." Vela shook her head. "You almost died for me. No one has ever done anything like that. Not for me, not for any Arthi." She paused, struggling to find the right words. "You shattered more than silence, Jack. You shattered everything I believed about the galaxy." Jack smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "I didn't do anything special. I just saw someone who needed help. Seemed like the right thing to do." Vela reached out and gently took his bandaged hand, careful not to hurt him. "On my world," she said, "we have a saying, when someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that can never be repaid, but I don't think that's right. I don't owe you anything, because what you gave me wasn't about debt or payment. You gave me something I never had before." "What's that?" "Hope." Jack felt tears forming in his eyes, but he blinked them away. "Well, that's what friends are for, right?" Vela smiled. It was the most beautiful smile Jack had ever seen. "Yes," she said. "That's what friends are for." Outside the medical bay window, the stars glittered in the endless darkness of space. Somewhere out there on a small blue planet called Earth, people were celebrating. Their kind had finally been accepted. They had finally proven their worth, and it had all started with a simple act of kindness. A man who sat down next to a lonely princess, a man who wasn't afraid to be different, a man who asked for nothing more than to pass the salt. In the years that followed, a new saying spread across the galaxy. Travelers and Traders, diplomats, and soldiers, they all repeated it to each other in quiet moments. Never sit alone if there's a human nearby. They don't understand fear the way we do, and that makes them the bravest fools in the universe. Jack Miller never became famous. He didn't want statues or medals or songs written about him. He just wanted to go back to Earth someday, eat his sister's apple pie and play with his dog. But before he left the station, he made one promise: he would always have a seat saved for Princess Vela, and she would never have to eat alone.